Secure?
Somebody has to unmute him.
Can you please unmute Mr. Ranganathan?
Yes, thanks. Now I'm okay. I'm back. Thanks. Hi, Rajan. Hi, Ganesh. Hi, everybody.
Hi, CK.
So let me start. Rajan Navani, founder and CEO, JetSynthesys. Ganesh Natarajan, founder and executive chairman, 5S World. AIMA council members and distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you with us and a very warm welcome in another edition of AIMA's popular Leaders Speak series. Ms. Navani, it is a pleasure to have you and many thanks for agreeing to do a session on Metaverse for AIMA. You are one of the leaders of Indian efforts to develop Metaverse technologies and apply those in entertainment and commerce. You have got the backing of some of the really smart and famous investors, including Sachin Tendulkar, Adar Punawala, Chris Gopalakrishnan, and our own Vice President Nikhil Shrawani. You are the National President of Indian Digital Gaming Society, and you are also a key member of India's track for strategic dialogues with some of the India's key technology and trade partners, such as the USA, Israel, Singapore, Thailand. Thank you for joining us and a very warm welcome to you once again. Mr. Ganesh Natarajan, it's a pleasure to have you and many thanks for agreeing to moderate the discussion on Metaverse technology with Ms. Navani. You have founded 5S World as a platform for digital startups and social ventures in India. You are also a keen promoter of skill development in the country, and you have founded Global Talent Track and Skill Alpha. In addition to your co-founded 2 Indo-US joint ventures, Kalzoon Advisors and the Center for AI and Advanced Analytics, you have been a leader of Indian IT industry for decades, and you remain at the forefront of development and adoption of new technologies in the country. We look forward to a very informative and exciting conversation between you and Ms. Rajan Navani. Thank you for joining us and a very warm welcome to you. Ladies and gentlemen, the idea of Metaverse was popularized in science fiction a few decades ago, and in recent years, Hollywood movies have given us a glimpse of the possibilities of a Metaverse. Now there is a spate of forecasts about Metaverse technology's potential to expand business and economy. A Citi report predicts that Metaverse economy to be worth about 13 trillion by 2030 if it can be integrated with mobile phones. Business schools have taken notice, and few of them have already launched executive education programs in managing the Metaverse economy. Corporates themselves can smell the opportunity to build virtual empires of their own and are studying how to develop Metaverse properties and how to monetize those. The dream world is no longer fantasy of ideal minds. It is becoming a reality, and the first movers will get to colonize virtual realms and make the rules. We should have a fascinating session on a fascinating subject. With these words, it is my pleasure to invite Ganesh Natarajan to conduct the session. Over to you, Ganesh.
Thank you, CK, and thank you, Rekha, for agreeing to look at this session, because I think very few management associations, indeed very few organizations, have started taking Metaverse seriously. And for us to be able to have this discussion itself speaks of the pioneering spirit of people in AIMA, which is fantastic. Just to add 2 lines to Rajan's introduction. I mean, apart from everything you said, obviously one of our most successful industry leaders in India, in Western India, in Pune. He happens to be a neighbor where he lives, and he happens to be a neighbor where he works. So I meet very often. But also well known in many of us that Rajan has been leading India at 75, and that's an initiative that the government is very proud of, as you know. And people like Mr. CK Prahlad, etc., have been involved. But Rajan has been the champion for that, and I'm sure as India now resets its agenda for the next 25 years to India at 100 in the next 25 years, Rajan will again be leading that, because I think he's young enough to make that happen. So, and he also, of course, is very passionate about the social sector. The privilege to serve with him on the board of Lighthouse Communities, where his ideas for engaging, for getting people have been absolutely amazing. So let me tell you how we'll do this session. I mean, please do not look at me as any kind of IT expert. The role I intend to play in the next 40 minutes is, if any of you are fans of R.K. Lakshman's cartoons, there is always a little guy called the common man. And the common man brings out the issue that R.K. Lakshman is talking about. And that's what I want to do. I really want to represent the fact that very few people have a full understanding of metaverse. So I'm going to ask a lot of stupid questions so that Rajan can actually illuminate some of the facts that otherwise we would not ask. Because when many people, unfortunately, particularly in India, are afraid of asking what we within quotes would think of as a stupid question. But when it comes to an innovation, a brand new technology, I think there is no such thing as a stupid question. So, and we will speak for some time and then I'll keep opening up for questions. So anytime you have a question, just put up your hand and I'll request somebody from AIMA to tell us if somebody has a question. So we'll make it very interactive. But very quickly as an introduction, we all know digital. Okay, whether we know digital or not, we think we know digital because we have all heard of technology. Somebody has heard of cloud. Somebody has heard of maybe virtual reality. And like the blind man and the elephant, we all assume that we know digital. My own work today is primarily on not the cliched terminology called digital transformation, but what we call digital success. Because we really believe that even in digital, 80% of the efforts have not really led to the kind of outcomes that founders and CEOs wanted it to do. So digital success for us, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this in the context of metaverse, is not just technology. You need to understand digital technology. There are waves upon waves of digital technology, which we won't get into. But most important, it is what kind of new journeys can we fashion using digital. I mean, in State Bank of India, which Deepak kindly mentioned, we are literally obsessed with looking at new journeys for the 82-year-old bank customer, or the 25-year-old who's just getting into maybe financial transactions and thinks only fintechs matter. And for all these people, there can be different journeys that will enable observation, that will enable buying comparisons and the buying process. And that journey becomes very important. Leading from that, obviously, is redesigning the process. Because if your process is archaic and you try and force fit digital technology into it, it never succeeds. And then you move on to data. Most of us don't even know how much data we have in our own homes, as well as in the organizations. So managing data, extracting intelligence out of it, putting elements of artificial intelligence, what we today call not post-mortem analytics, but predictive, prescriptive analytics, is the fourth important factor. And finally, it's skills and culture. Because if we are, as somebody used to tell me in the early days of technology, that most of us we get fascinated with fifth generation technology, but our processes are third generation and our people are first generation. Okay, and that is the challenge for many of us, that we have come up evolutionarily to understanding technology, if at all we do, but we don't understand new revolutions because we need to be ingrained into that. So look at today's session as some kind of a teaser or a mind opener to what is the exciting world of metaverse. And to do that, I'm going to do it in three parts, and Rajan and I will have this conversation. First, we'll demystify technology a little bit. And we're going to take a word that even techies don't understand very well called Web 3.0 and talk a little bit about it. Then we will lead that into, so what is metaverse? Okay, there have been many previous avatars of trying to do something which is entirely on the internet. But today it's becoming successful. And why will it be successful? What has changed today? And that's what I'll kind of talk to Rajan about. And last, of course, we will end with, so what's in it for us? Why are 202 people on this chat? Because you want to know, how does it affect your life? How does it affect your company's life? How does it affect the society's life? How does it impact digital India, which we're also excited about? And we'll end with that. So very quickly to start, and let me start by saying that, look, let's understand technology a little bit. All of you, without exception, know the internet. You're here because of the internet on this group. But the internet was enabled by something called the World Wide Web. And the web was nothing but, initially, if you look at, or call it Web 1.0, was nothing but static pages of advertising. I mean, you could see it on Times of India, you could see it on Web 1.0. There was no interactivity. Came Web 2.0, and suddenly you started interacting a little bit, and you said, hey, oh my God, this is something that is a living thing. And suddenly we are moving towards something called Web 3.0. So Rajan, this is my first question to you, and of course, feel free to give an introduction. But I mean, so what is this Web 3.0, and what are we talking about when we say here is a new phenomenon coming through?
So thanks, Ganesh, and thanks, EKR and AIMA for inviting me here. Always a pleasure to be here, and I'm also going to learn as much as, share some of my thoughts from the questions, because as Ganesh rightly said, this is such a evolving, journey and such an evolving industry that the opportunities are endless just because of the ability for many of us to be able to use these technologies to its optimal, benefit. But, to start with, Ganesh, with regards to your question as far as Web3 is concerned, I think that is the fundamental shift, or, the foundation building block on which, this entire metaverse discussion, the entire world of crypto, which we have suddenly heard so much about, is based, right? From a generation of Web 1.0, which was read only, to a generation of Web 2.0, which was read write. Now we really have the ability to own digital assets in the internet world. I think the fact that blockchain technology enables ownership and visibility of that ownership across the entire spectrum is what has really made a big difference with Web3. And therefore, we believe that the way consumers and the world will interact with each other is going to be drastically different, in this new world. And there's a massive opportunity to create value and assets that are, some of which we don't even understand. And just to give a quick example, when we interact with Gen Zs, because, we built JetSynthesys and, a lot of our new age digital businesses is catering to the digital life of digital native people, the people under the age of 25. And of course, India is fortunate to have 1 in 10 people in the world who fall into that category. So we have a mass base to really understand their behavior, the way they are engaging. And I must say that, when you talk to them and you ask them, will you buy a house? They say, I don't think I'm ever going to get the money to buy it. But even if we do, we'll buy a small home. What are you going to put in that home? Well, we'll have a small home, so we won't be able to put any assets. So we are going to actually build our value for the future, in the digital world on the internet. I mean, just think of that shift that is happening globally across people who are now beginning to trust the internet probably more than the real world. And they're trusting it because, of this fundamental shift that has happened of blockchain technologies and the ability to control that value, pretty much in a very decentralized manner. So, the second big shift, which is truly there is this centralized ability of interaction, and the fear that one company knows everything about you, has also moved a lot of people, especially Gen Zs and the younger lot, to kind of rebel against that in a way where this entire blockchain system really gives governance in the hands of those who are, part of the chain. And, that the beauty is that whether it's value and whether it's access, that can all be controlled and pre-programmed. So if you live in a generation today where, a woman, Google knows that a woman is pregnant even before she knows, because you went and searched for some, things that you were kind of symptoms you were having, etc. And Google confirmed your pregnancy even before you did a test, to a world really where, you will be controlling the future of a collective group, and I think the centralization, whether it is power with governments, whether it's with companies, whether it is with individuals, whether it's corporations, is again a big driver of how the future will unfold. So the decentralization that Web 3.0 brings is again a very powerful, aspect of Web 3. And somewhere we believe that even corporations, probably the way we know them today, might drastically shift and change. And the true value of why this is something that is real, Ganesh, and that we know is happening, because nearly $300 billion of real world money has actually already moved and transformed, it moved itself into a world which is created trillions of dollars of value. Of course, that value will keep shifting and there will be crashes. And sometimes some of these things are very good because it is establishing really what is the right way to move forward. But, the person who in May 2010 actually gave 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 slices of pizza, which is today valued at $238 million as per today's Bitcoin value, is really signifying of the value creation potential between a physical transaction, a physical world transaction, and a digital world transaction that had happened at that period or that point in time. And what that could mean to the world is the second aspect. And I think this is the foundational building block on which consumers will interact and experience, and where metaverse is going to ride on. So I think the generational shift that we are seeing is probably as large as what we saw with the internet, in the 2000s and Web 2 as we kind of understood it.
So Rajan, before we move to metaverse, I mean, let me just again put on the Lakshman common man, and say that, look, so when I look at 3.0, what you want me to say is that, look, one, as you rightly said, there is no centralized control. So it's completely decentralized, like everything that you understand about blockchain. Potentially, because it's blockchain, it could also be very logically used for cyber currency, etc. But that's not a prerequisite. The second, what you're saying is that, look, the whole visual has changed, because in the good old days, many of us are old enough to remember, we had black and white newspapers, they got colored, etc., etc. So did our movies. And sooner or later, I think the internet brought you the colors from real life. But today, I think with mixed reality, as Satya Nadella of Microsoft calls it, there's the ability to augment reality, which is AR, augmented reality. There is the ability to completely visualize something very, very different, which is virtual reality. So I think that's the second big element. And the third element, I presume, is making it intelligence. I mean, this whole artificial intelligence that we talk about could probably make interactions using Web 3.0 much more comprehensive, much more intelligent than in the previous avatar. So would that be the right way to say it, or is there something I'm missing?
No, definitely. I think that's one great context, and the way to look at it. But I think more importantly, Ganesh, is that we have to be able to map the behavior of future consumers, and really what technologies will they adopt and at what speed, right? And the beauty about the smart contracts in the decentralized world is that the same data is properly propagated everywhere, right? So even if half of the world servers are hacked, the authenticity of your ownership of a particular asset in the Web3 world will still be there, right? The world will see it pretty much like you have a registration of your plot of land, which lies with some central authority. Here, the world knows that you own it, and it's in a very decentralized manner, right? So I think the fact that Bitcoin's code is, again, and I'm talking of currency primarily just to underline the starting point of what is this Web3 shift, is that the code is known to everyone, right? There were 10.5 million Bitcoins done. There will be total 21 million. Every few years, we get half of that 10 points. So the next one released 5.25, next will release half, that MLM strategy, which we used to always think was, like a Ponzi kind of way of doing things, and, a scheme that doesn't work. Now it's a visible thing to everybody. Everybody knows what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, and how does this asset, which will finally unlock its last Bitcoin somewhere in 2140, play out over the next 100 years from where we are today. It's very exciting because nobody can truly predict, and who is going to be able to drive that future are the ones who are part of it. And the reason I'm talking of the currency piece, and we'll stop talking about this from here, is because the economy of any area is a very key driver of how people will engage in that space. And today it takes about 10 minutes, I would say, to translate your value in a crypto world to a real world currency kind of shift. But the day it becomes instant, like today when you transfer your US dollar to a euro or any two currencies or any to a trade a stock is instant. I think that's the day this huge jump and shift will come, where the interoperability between all these worlds will become far smoother. But how will governments move? What will be the regulatory environment? Which are the countries? Where is that going to happen? Are all going to be very key drivers. But having a ability to monetize, own that space in a manner that is intuitive to the digital space is going to be a very key driver of how people will engage with the metaverse. So I think important to just highlight that, in addition to what you rightly pointed.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And as I think, as all of you would know, I mean, today when we're talking about connected worlds, I think the distribution of power and having authorities which are not centralized is the way the world is moving, and there is no doubt about that. And just to give you an example to illustrate the common man's value of virtual reality. again, the entity that Rajan and I are actively engaged in, called Lighthouse Communities, which is working with 100,000 people around 4 states, and people from the slums, youth who have been very sheltered. I mean, sheltered is the wrong word to use, but kept away from a lot of the aspirational aspects that we see. And I still remember about 2 years back when we introduced virtual reality into one of the training centers. And the reason was very simple. I mean, here were people who wanted to be a paramedic or nursing assistant, etc. But when you told them that, look, it doesn't matter if you're only a high school graduate or not even that, you can still go into that big gleaming edifice called Jahangir Hospital in Pune and work there as a nursing assistant. It was impossible cognitively for them to feel that they could do it. So we use virtual reality then by saying that just put on this headset and we will transport you to the operating theater of Jahangir Hospital, where you will see the doctor operating on the patient. In addition, you will see somebody who looks like you helping the doctor, okay, with the scrubs, with the taking the pulse, etc. And suddenly it came to life for them saying, wo kar sakti hai, to main bhi kar sakta hu. And I think that is the advantage of interactive technologies nowadays. To move to metaverse, let me tell all of you, I don't know how many of you are techies, then you would have heard about 15 years ago about an entity called Second Life. It was still Web 2.0, there was still limited interactivity, but they came up with this concept saying that you can actually build your own AIMA or your own, I was running this company Zensar, and a young kid came and told me, let's build a Zensar campus on Second Life. And I said, sure, here's the budget, go ahead and do it. And interesting, because I still remember she called me to watch the activity on Metaverse. It's happening on the internet. It's a parallel. You go there, you can actually navigate your way through your mouse to a place which looks exactly like the Zensar campus we had in Pune, was also there on Metaverse. And suddenly I saw, and this was in front of my eyes, a wolf coming up to the gates of the virtual campus. And the wolf walked in and started interacting. And we had a counselor who would interact, etc., etc. But the wolf was very intelligent, because the questions he was asking was absolutely fantastic. And then I realized the wolf was actually a human being, but he had put on the avatar of a wolf, which means that he wanted to be seen as a wolf in the cyber world. And sooner or later, he got interested in what we were doing. We got interested in his intelligence of his questions. And the person said, look, why don't you come and look for a job in our company? We'd love to have people like you. And he said, what do I do? He said, job we can't give you on the Second Life. You'll have to come to our campus. And sure enough, he showed up the next day, obviously without the wolf costume. But at the same time, he was very good. So this was my first interaction. But Rajan, Second Life. Why did that fail and why did that not take off? And what is it about metaverse, leading into metaverse, that you think will make it more successful than the big dreams of the past?
So, I think like everything else, when a big boy like Facebook changes its word name to Meta, I think that was the big trigger when the world started taking notice, right? Because here is a company that actually was able to mobilize a community of 2 billion people on planet Earth across geographies, across economic backgrounds, across the ability, on a simple ability to be able to create a social network that just connected people, right? With Meta, I think you just take that into this absolute next dimension, right? How does social, community, commerce, immersive experiences, everything now play out, as an outcome of what has been created, like as a community. So today, when we all got social on, and we still know people who are very cautious of what they post on social media, how we will do, and we know there's a great positive element to social media. You see the number of influencers, number of people who are now making their livelihoods, through YouTube, in a creator economy, etc. And how many, are still staying out of that revolution, just not willing to accept that, the social media, it's taken, a while, right? So metaverse, in a way, is a new form of social interaction that Gen Zs and the world will engage with. If one were to look at it in that simple angle, whether it's your customers, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, I think that's the easiest way for me to give anybody else a sense of that. 5G coming on is going to make a big difference to that, right? So one of the reasons why immersive experiences, we are particularly running off the internet, augmented reality, you don't want lags in your experiences and the consumer experiences, etc., will also be triggered massively by 5G. So I think it's a coming together of some external technologies that is now positioned, that same Second Life as being far more powerful. Because today, as I was saying earlier, not only do you create an avatar in the Second Life and do whatever, you can own assets. Your assets will probably increase or depreciate on the basis of the choices you make. You can, get a skin of a person, like today, if you see two companies that have really taken the fight to the metaverse already, large companies, is footwear companies, Adidas and Nike. And you really have to go and see how they are looking at the metaverse as the driver, because the Gen Zs today, when they're talking of the sneaker revolution, they're buying sneakers to be able to make money off it, appreciate on it, hold on it. I mean, it's a total generation that many of us would not even be able to relate to. But even Adidas and Nike know that the creators of their shoe designs are going to be the ones of power tomorrow and not the companies themselves. So they're happy to play in a decentralized manner, have an early mover advantage, bring their creators out there and have the consumers interact in a very plain peer-to-peer manner, but at the end of the day, have some influence on the future of that. So, you will see that happening in many, many different sectors. In entertainment, gaming, of course, where we have, our route into, this entire metaverse has been primarily because, we've been strong gaming company, right? I mean, when we have simulated cricket, we have 60% of the global market share in people who are making virtual purchases in simulated cricket, right? And upgrading the gear, upgrading that. So people understand the value of buying virtual goods. Now, how do we, get them to buy virtual goods that are more rare, that are more exclusive, that they can earn money out of by, investing deeper into it? And what they're really investing into is time. Many of the, most of the times it's your experience, your time. And we'll come to that probably, as you mentioned earlier, in some of the sectors where this change will be more rapid and more drastic than others. But definitely there is this big shift in change in the way consumers are going to interact that is changing. But nothing changes the fact that even today, a good 3D virtual world experience on a smartphone, right, is good enough for you to be able to get an entry point into the metaverse. And for people like us, when we really see a large interconnected user base across different platforms, whether it's entertainment, whether it's commerce, whether it's different types of games, that interconnected user base aligning around one ecosystem or one universe, is going to be very powerful. I still remember an interaction I had with Hirai-san from Sony, and this was exactly in context of Facebook. And he's the chairman of Sony, and he said, Sony has 2 billion customers around the world, but we have no clue where they are, who they are, because someone's using a Sony, listening to Sony music, someone's bought a Sony TV, someone's doing something else with Sony, maybe a hard drive, but I have no clue. Right? A metaverse kind of an experience brings a connected user base experience into a different world, and you can actually demonstrate, showcase to the consumer how you are, as a company, as a brand, truly shaping their life, on a day-to-day basis. And I think companies that can take that shift, right? It's very similar, Ganesh, to when people said, what is a website? Many people use a website just to put information. Then came these e-commerce guys, and and not e-commerce, they're like proper large companies that made e-commerce the way. So the same website today is transacting billions of dollars and created value like nothing else, right? Metaverse is probably as large a shift in economic value and opportunities that will come. Now, whether it's the incumbents that will make that happen, whether disruptors and others with new business models will come and take over that space. But 20 years from today, just because of this fundamental principle of having governance in the hands of your consumers, assuming you're selling anything, right? You're selling toothpaste, and you say, what flavor of toothpaste I want to want and how much I'm going to pay for that toothpaste, the consumers are going to decide. I think the way the world will operate, from a corporate structure itself might change. So we don't know how much of this change will happen. I think one thing we should be cognizant that this technology today enables that world to exist. Now, how will it be driven there? What will prevent that is something that we should we need to kind of play out.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, because there's so many people I know who have kind of now bought these NFTs, digital assets for those of you. I mean, if you've written a great poem and you convert it to an NFT and post it on Metaverse, I mean, every time somebody reads your poem or sends it to somebody else, you'll get money for it. Similarly, and so you could own a lot of stuff which is actually proprietary, it's owned by you, but it's still available to the whole world at large. I think the point that Rajan was making. And again, just to give you an example, many of us or many women would aspire to own a Louis Vuitton or a Christian Dior outfit. But today in the digital world, and that's what Rajan was talking about in terms of digital retail, you could probably rent a Louis Vuitton dress for a cyber evening for maybe as little as $12 for the evening. And maybe you could rent something else later. So people are saying, I mean, of course, as all of us know, I mean, in the good old days, we used to say that, look, when we take up a job, our first goal was probably to buy an apartment for ourselves and then maybe to buy a car. Today, young people say, look, I never want to own an apartment because it ties me down. I never want to own my car. My daughter has been working in UK and US for the last 18 years, never learned driving. She says, why would I? I mean, who wants the hassles of parking and everything else with Uber and Ola and all these digital are there? So I think exactly the point that Rajan was making, the consumer's mind is going to change abruptly. So Rajan, question to you. I mean, there's a lot of thinking that we used to nicely silo them as business to business e-commerce and business to consumer. But there's a feeling that exactly what you alluded to also, that business to business will also become directly interacting with the customer, because Metaverse enables the person to interact with her favorite consumer. There's a lot of disintermediation. So do you see that happening? And is that a threat to the traditional silos in which we have run business?
No, definitely. I think this has already started to happen, Ganesh, right? But as I said, it is happening in select areas. And I just took the example of a sneaker, right? Today, the creators who are building that, right, in the metaverse. So your avatar goes, tries it on, you have a skin, you have that, you pay for it in the metaverse, right? And then you order that same thing in a physical size. You have a 3D printer that really prints that out of new materials and actually gives you that footwear on your feet, within a matter of hours, right? Now, this kind of interactivity, interoperability between the physical and virtual worlds is going to truly disrupt, I think, the way the future is going to play out. Now, it is really upon companies as to how are they going to engage the metaverse to make some of this happen, right? As we saw, even when we talk of, the industries that have got disrupted, both in the B2C and the B2B space, either through, large consumer traction, coming out of e-commerce or many other things, or, the SaaS models, new business models that have, put a lot of traditional businesses, out of, competent operational levels, I think has all come mainly because of the entrepreneurs and others who have driven this to a different level. So I think what is going to happen is how people are going to really play this out. Everything is going to get immersive for sure when it comes to the metaverse experience. But that immersive experience is really, taking us to a point of what is the reality that I live in, right? Many people, if you step a little back and you look at it spiritually, even the real world that we see, many of us say, this is the Moh Maya, this is not the real world. Now what is really the real world? So, while we talk of augmented reality and we talk of virtual reality, I think my bet is really on mixed reality. I think the mixed reality will come when you'll have a device like you're wearing some glasses, you're entering into a metaverse, your avatar is interacting with social people, platforms there, you're stepping out into your real world, doing few things. You look at what we are doing today, right? I'm in Singapore, I'm in some other thing, in a live meeting, I stepped out from that to do this virtual. We are getting ourselves immersed into communities and worlds beyond the physical interactive world that we have known it. I mean, if we look at it from the early days, it was just the community that you lived with. Then we got travel, then people started interacting with other communities, then digital, then Facebook, social, you suddenly started interacting. And now, you're actually going to interact through worlds that you want to participate in. Now, what are those worlds? Is it going to be a few metaverses that are going to control the world? Will every company evolve into its own kind of a metaverse, and metaverse might just be an extension of what you do? How long would it take to get there? These are all questions that are exciting enough for us to just think about. But really, who's going to drive us there, is anybody's guess. But possibilities definitely exist, right? And I think, as devices costs are coming down, and the weight of virtual headsets is coming down, because that immersive experience there is as good as the experience you have physically meeting, right? Many people say Zoom call, okay, we are somewhere there, but when you meet physically, it's much better, right? As we go back to
if I may
that
say
world.
so, if I may say so, Raj, the immersive experience is sometimes augmented and is better than the real experience.
Correct. Especially when you look at our celebrities. So we have Sachin, we have Amitabh, we have all these top music, Sonu Nigam's NFT. So there we are creating concerts where you're up and close to him, right there. You can see the speck on his face. You can talk to him. He's talking to you, shaking hands. That experience, in a physical world, you have to fly for like 12 hours or something to go and meet someone. And there also you may just get a glimpse of that person. Here you get the satisfaction of having got the information or the same joy that you would have got in the physical world. So I think that immersiveness that comes with 5G, that comes with virtual reality, mixed reality, where the world is going, is probably going to be, again, the next tipping point, where an aspect like metaverse becomes such a large part of a consumer's life. And I think one thing we all agree, we have two options, right? Either we drive consumer behavior, and invest billions and billions of dollars to change the way people behave, or when people have changed, we just go there and get them where somebody else has invested or something else has moved them to already make that choice. And I think somewhere we have always taken that approach that we will definitely be where the consumer has gone, and in small select areas try to make incremental changes to their behavior to drive what we would like to see. So I think it's very interesting how companies can look at this as we move forward.
No, I'll come to that. And in fact, just last couple of questions before we throw it open. And by the way, Mr. Sundarmurthy, your question on what does VR have to do with metaverse is exactly what just answered. That you could potentially watch a concert of your favorite, let's say a Sonu Nigam or whoever, and you can be much more interactive and much more close up than even sitting in the front row of a concert theater. So I think that is the advantage of using technologies like this. But to move a little to the question mark that a lot of people have. In fact, we had a recent discussion when somebody said, even social media is a necessary evil. Now, you and I may not agree with that, being very active participants on social media, but a lot of people feel that way. And in the whole COVID era itself, which is still not completely over, we found that, there's been lots of emotional, psychological issues. So tell me, I mean, if let's say our teenagers and our kids grow up by preferring to spend more time in the artificial metaverse rather than actually going out and playing in the parks and enjoying with friends in a bar or a restaurant, what will that do to civilization? I mean, is this a good trend or is it something that is a necessary evil?
So, Ganesh, like everything, right? It's about balance. Then there's something new, you'll find, certain set of people who get, totally engaged, and kind of get very, very deep into it. There will others who will, not accept it, right? These are the two extremes. And then everybody else is somewhere in the middle, right? And one sees how that, that shift happens. But you're absolutely right. I think, leading that balance between your physical world and your virtual world, how do you really use this virtual world for good? I'll tell you, metaverse in healthcare and well-being, metaverse is probably going to be one of your biggest, opportunities, right? So it's crazy. I mean, I can't talk about some of the technologies and things that we're working on and developing, but without you really doing much, your motivation triggers to do a lot in the physical world, thanks to you being in the metaverse, is going to be a different, ability that you're going to see change, right? Because your social acceptance, your health, your everything will come out of, a community that is driving you towards that, some stimulation that you probably don't have in your real world. You wake up in the morning, you have breakfast with your wife, you go back, you go to work, you finish that day, you come back. Here, 5-10 minutes in a metaverse with a community of people who are absolutely obsessed with well-being, will change the way you will interact in your physical world, right? So as I'm saying, there could be, you're absolutely right. Every technology is as good or as bad as the people who use it and really how they use it, right? And I think that is something that will shape up. But I think all of us know that there are some things on our mobile phone that, we know is helping us in some shape and form, right? To do better in our thing. And we'll figure that what that is. And I think Metaverse is only going to take that deeper. So the key is that your engagement with that world is going to deepen. Of course, as we've been discussing, and we've seen a lot of things happening around, how do you also then use digital detox as a mechanism, to keep that balance going, will all be things that will emerge, right? And we see that happening, extensively, especially with the younger generation. And I think there we cannot push that away, right? I think there has to be responsibility. Companies need to, step up to ensure that, we are helping shape those generations in the right way. But one thing is that evolution is also at play. I think the next gen, you see the way they multitask and the way they do things, I don't think many of us, were naturally gifted to do that. So there's a lot out here that I think goes beyond some of our understanding and explanation, but overall point noted. And I think that is really where, a collective responsibility lies with us, similar to AI, right? What is the ethics in AI, right? For what does it mean to the human mind and intellect? I think these questions will also come up when it goes to Metaverse, and then the ability to link, especially when AI becomes a key part of your Metaverse experience, right? And I think these are all going to be subjects that should be prioritized collectively. Communities, industry, governments should be talking and discussing globally. Again, unfortunately, it's not just what we discuss, maybe at a state level or at a national level, like we would do with our industry bodies here, but it's a global conversation that governments need to have. Awareness has to go up. So I think somewhere policy and all always, follows the technology innovation, unfortunately, that's the way it is. And maybe that could be one shift that we should try and bring more collective. So maybe in this conversation, we should have some policymakers and others, with us to, who can, help, take some of these changes that are happening in consumer behaviors, etc., to larger cross sections of society early on, so that we can have a more meaningful discussion on how this can shape up overall.
No, absolutely, Rajan. And in fact, you mentioned digital detox. My worry is that when do people figure out that they are digitally intoxicated to then decide to do detox? You can cross that chasm very, very easily, and it's not easy to do that. So that was one. And second is, of course, I think the concern we all have that we won't be able to draw the line. Even in WhatsApp groups, for instance, I'm sure all of you are aware of that. If you are in a WhatsApp group where 15,000 people are saying good morning every day, it's a complete waste of time. At the same time, there are very divisive, negative WhatsApp groups, and then you say everything is wrong with social media. But ultimately, we must remember it's our choice, which group to be part of, where to engage, what do you get out of Twitter, what do you get out of LinkedIn, what do you get out of Facebook is all important. And there is one cliche which I think nobody should forget, that the world is never as good as it looks on Facebook, nor as bad as it seems on Twitter. So it's your question of having your own balance to discern what is the reality. And I think that's where, and my last cliche, people keep saying that artificial intelligence, AI will change the world. But please remember, artificial intelligence is not an antidote for natural stupidity. Okay, so I think if we all as intelligent people on this group are able to understand the technology, understand the inherent security and isolation risks that go with it, then you will benefit from Metaverse. Last question to you, Rajan, and then I'll open it up for anybody who wants to. And there are a couple of chat questions, which I will take up. And then, of course, anybody wants to ask a direct question, please feel free. And so, Rajan, what is, people are talking about, okay, Metaverse is already a 30, 40 billion commercial reality, will become $1 trillion in the next 10 years. Okay, and it's probably going to grow like 40 to 45% every year in terms of actual revenue realization. So apart from retail, which you mentioned, apart from gaming, which are obvious ones, a traditional company, somebody has asked a question saying, I work with MSMEs. How does an MSME maybe making some components for Sanjay Kirloskar's company, how do they look at Metaverse, and how does a smaller company participate in Metaverse?
So, I think the evolution of how Metaverse interaction will happen, right? At the end of the day, we got to remember Metaverse is a mechanism by way of which businesses and consumers will interact with the world, right? It's an ecosystem, so it cannot really be one small piece in that metaverse that is making a difference. So the way we look at it today, the way the world has it, there are some large metaverses that have already been formed, where they sell the land. You can go and literally create your own world, and take your, whatever your operation, and even a small store can go and set that SEMS up, whether it's Decentraland, Sandbox, many of these. And there are global metaverses that are being created within which you can go and set up your little operation. Consumers are coming in, they interact with your product or your service, and you have an ability to do that. So it's literally what you would do with the World Wide Web, pretty much in your current form through your websites and other aggregator websites which you can be a part of. That you can similarly do, in the metaverse. But there are some industries that will get fundamentally shifted, right? Banking is a big example, especially where digitization levels are very high, right? The first, the loan of the real world, suddenly got securitized through the metaverse kind of crypto world currencies, right? Now that's happening. So securitization for real world money is happening through the crypto world. Now that's a fundamental shift in the way in which things are going to move. Now these are very big, large changes, right? How consumers will interact with products and services from the physical world through a metaverse experience is probably the first generation of change that we are going to see, right? So very similar to, think of it like a website. Then whether you really want to be on a website, if you remember earlier, it was those classifieds, you could go and position your service or something there and people would take it, right? That's one, or then you go and create your own website, right? So I think metaverse, the initial phase is really about connecting a new user base that is engaging now through metaverse with the world, and you having a presence there, right? That's the first level. And second is this fundamental shift on how Web3 and its opportunity, both through the immersive experience, the decentralized experience, and the ownership experience. If we just take these three very strong pillars that we've talked about so far, right? What businesses can be driven, through the change there, right? Like decentralization probably to me hits every industry. There is no industry that will not be hit because of it. Immersive, getting a consumer experience or a business experience that is distinctly different. Again, will, education, for example, right? Immersive, the ability to really explain things, teach things, will sit at the cross section of many of these, three pillars. So I think every industry or business would need to kind of evaluate themselves in that context and see, where the first generational shift is coming. But I truly believe that the decentralized way of looking at things, say 10, 15 years from today, is if one is able to build that, because now you see the word D coming before everything, right? DeFi, D this, D, like how digital word, maybe 5 years ago, and today appears as a normal thing. Before, you put digital before healthcare, you put digital before any word, manufacturing, and it makes complete sense, right? So think of if you put a decentralized word before that, right? And what does that really mean to the world? Think of it that way. Means there's not only digital, but there is power of the digital in the hands of whoever is interacting with you, whether it's a business or it's a consumer. Now that is a very different world. And I don't think we can even imagine, maybe somewhere, I remember a conversation we were having. It's like going back to the early days of barter, right? Everybody, did some role and everybody was getting everything in some shape and form. This is what they did. But today, in a digitally interconnected world, which is totally decentralized and so transparent, right? I think this revolt against this centralized power of a few large companies has really taken this blockchain technology, and this generation has taken it to a completely different level. So
but
I think
can I jump in and ask?
That's both the fear and the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also a fear, but it's also an opportunity.
So let me address a couple of fears that have come out in the chat. Again, it's around Bitcoin, your favorite topic. So Mr. Yoganandan says that everybody's fear is that still nobody knows who owns the Bitcoin and who's behind this Bitcoin, and the people who try to invest in that feel insecure. Related question from Mr. Alok Krishna. Connected to this question, is Bitcoin still not controlled by a fewer set of organizations who actually understand the technology, leading to challenge of control or centralization of power? Ideally, achieving decentralization or democratization, is that happening or is it actually intended to? So where do you think Bitcoin is leading us?
No, so it's interesting, right? And therefore I said, think of that pizza company who got those 10,000 coins, right? If they just held those coins, that's what those 2 pizza slices would have, cost. And I was looking up, it was 22nd of May 2010 when that transaction happened, right? Now, see, Bitcoin, it's again, we need to understand, it's just a simple line of code that is visible to everybody. So it doesn't matter who wrote that code, who created that code. Of course, there are different, words on names and all of that. And there are so many that have got created after that, right? Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, so many other, kind of so-called currencies of the virtual world have already been created. But think of it like that. It is just a piece of code which is transparent, which everybody knows how many Bitcoins will be there. You also know the dates on which those Bitcoins will get mined, who will mine it, how will it happen around the world. Everything is clear. So if you ask me in terms of predictability and transparency, I think there couldn't be anything better, right? It's like you would just hold on to it because there is some intrinsic value. Now, unless the whole world decides that, there is no value in that, it will change or something else changes. Of course, as I said, we are not here to take a position, this is good or that is not right or wrong, but there are, many, many millions of people today who are owning that as an asset class. There are countries who are holding the country's reserves, in cryptocurrencies today. So we are seeing that happen, in a massive manner. So while on one side, we might see like countries having a digital version of their currency. On the other, I think we will also see, these new currencies coming in, where what is their intrinsic value? What are they backed by? Like here, there's a country of so many people creating such livelihoods. What is that livelihood going to look like in the digital world? So they always say, these new coins, etc., that come in, what is their utilitarian value, to the common man? Is it just speculation or is there a utilitarian value? And I will tell you, people are going to discover new utility value to a lot of these currencies. And we are not going to do that. As I said, it's the Gen Zs that are doing it. Like today, when you see that, the Bored Ape, right, who's worth millions of dollars, it's just one NFT of a ape who is bored, and there, if you go into the story and the generation of that, but today a Bored Ape is owned by celebrities. It's worth several millions of dollars, and you want a Bored Ape, you can't buy it. It's just not available for you. It's like a Picasso painting, actually even more rare and more scarce than that. Now, why would someone want to do it? What is that value to a certain set of community? It is a status symbol. Like, why would we make a great home? Why would we put art on the walls? Whom are we trying to impress? That generation thinking is completely different. And it's interesting because they are not even worried about what people in the real world think about their assets. They are worried about what their avatars and their avatars' friends in their digital world think of their digital assets. I mean, we're going to a completely different level of discussion here for the future. So why is something valuable to someone is a very interesting question, right? And I think even today we have the communists or so much who say money is not the value by way of which you measure worth of a person or anything, right? It's how you interact with others and the social aspects. So there's a huge philosophical and generational change that is happening around the world that none of us are really able to put a finger on the pulse, but that's what we're all trying to figure out.
But in a sense, Rajan, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, that even if you look at the Vedanta or the Mandukya Upanishads, we're talking about the same thing here. That it's perception, and perception is reality. And here you can change your perceived reality so much that you'll probably end up forgetting what reality is. But is that reality? Okay, so there's all kinds of fundamental questions here. One final question, which is I think Mr. Senthivel Kumar has asked a very intelligent question, saying that, look, if a company or a brand wants to invest in the metaverse, should they worry more about technology or should they worry more about creative content that is put out there? What is likely to be there, or what should be their investment area?
No, so I think very clearly to worry about the strategy and the content that goes there. Like one of the things we are building is through one of our companies is building metaverses with businesses also, right? Because we want to see, while our consumers are interacting, we're also seeing that. And very clearly, the technology is not really the issue, Ganesh, here, right? Because technology, one can always put together basis the outcome that a business wants, but it's really about understanding their consumer and customer and seeing where the consumer and customer can most benefit, from a metaverse experience. I think that to us is at least now seeming like the first initial driving point for many companies. But as I said, there are many companies who have gone way ahead and, really using the metaverse as, or at least betting on their metaverse being the primary, mechanism of engagement with consumers or businesses in the future, and really, therefore building and investing so much behind that. As we see companies, investing in Bitcoins. I mean, we know the Tesla story, right? I mean, Tesla used to accept Bitcoins for its cars very early on, right? I mean, and when Elon Musk sold some Bitcoins, the whole market crashed. I mean, it's crazy, right? How companies also have used the Web3 crypto world, as I was talking of, NFTs, etc., to their advantage. So it's really about the strategy that a company really wants to see evolve through this. What is the depth of understanding? But more importantly, it's always going to be, I would think, the creative elements, the technology, and there are many startups and companies that are building the infrastructure needs that are going to enable, a far greater interaction on the metaverse. So it's really about creating the solution that's best for you. That would be most important.
No, that's amazing, Rajan.
I mean, whether it's a business or it's a consumer or it's a human being.
Absolutely. No, I think I completely agree with you. And in fact, if you look at the way, as most of you would know, where digital India is progressing, and we had a fascinating conversation on that a year back in the AIMA forum. I mean, we're talking about something called today the ONDC, which is the Open Network for Digital Commerce, and that is enabling multiple platforms to interact with each other. So whether we like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we will have an environment where a lot of stuff is happening virtually. We're seeing that right here with Zoom, and I don't think there's been a single flaw in the transmission or anything that the technology. But you are looking for good content, you'll get it anywhere. You'll get it on Netflix, you'll get it on Amazon Prime. You will still, like I do, wander across to a theater and watch it more for the popcorn than for the viewing experience. But it's a personal choice. And I think what Rajan is saying is that, look, think about what is the opportunity. Don't get kind of dazzled by what's out there, but think about your own strategy, the point Rajan made. Then look at how you can use your content, your capability to attract others if you're looking for friendships, to attract consumers, to attract other business-to-business kind of prospects. But clearly, if you think through that well and understand the underlying technology, there is a huge opportunity. It's still early days, ladies and gentlemen. The metaverse is still very, very much a land grab or the gold rush that we saw many, many years ago. But as we all say, I mean, and don't worry if you don't know enough about it, even at the end of this conversation. I mean, there's a lovely book that I've read 20 years back, which was actually subtitled, "Strange How Much You Have to know how little you really know." Because otherwise, you can be in our own la land of saying that, look, I don't need to know these new technologies, but your consumers will want to know it, especially the digital natives, the youngsters. And it's extremely important for us to absorb, appreciate, and start implementing some of these ideas. So let me, on your behalf, thank you, Rajan. Rajan, that was absolutely fantastic. And obviously your depth of knowledge will need many conversations between you and me. And we started this 6 months back. But I do hope that some of you have got interested and will make this part of your agenda going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ganesh, for having me here. And thanks.
Thanks, Rajan. Thanks, Ganesh. I think it was a wonderful session. We had over 502 people logged on to our social media channel, apart from over 200 which were there on the Zoom platform. And we're getting some super comments on the chat now. Thank you so much for a wonderful session. And I hope, Rajan, we keep you engaged with AIMA going forward. CKR, any closing words you have?
I think it was a wonderful topic and extraordinary speakers. I would say that very brilliant, and they're very knowledgeable, both of them. I think threw a lot of light. And as this thing not so well versed with metaverse, I also got educated to some extent. I hope this education will be useful for my journey as well. Similarly, for all others who participated in the platform. Thanks, Rajan. Thanks, Ganesh, for the wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.